Welcome, everyone. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome and thank you for joining us today for a discussion of advocacy priorities for Vermont's creative sector. I'm Karen Middleman. I'm Executive Director of the Vermont Arts Council. We are your state arts agency, and we're also the backbone organization for our statewide Vermont Creative Network. I'm going to introduce our other two speakers in a moment, but first some information about logistics. The session is being recorded, and it's also being live captioned by white coat captioning. If you'd like to view the captions during the session, you can click on the closed captions button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can also view a full page text of the captions by clicking on the link that's posted in the chat box, which my colleague Deirdre Connolly has just posted. That will open all the captions in a separate browser so you can view them during the session. We'll take questions from all of you at the end of the session after all of the presentations. During the meeting, if something occurs to you, you want to post a question, go ahead and post it in the chat at the bottom of your screen, and we'll take those, as I said, after we're done with the presentations. You can also use chat to communicate any tech issues that you're having. Any technical problems, and Deirdre Connolly will try to address them for you. At the Vermont Arts Council, it's our practice to start all public meetings with a land acknowledgement. We recognize that wherever you're zooming in from around the state of Vermont, the land that we all stand on today is the traditional unsurrendered territory of the Abenaki people, one of 5 Wabanaki nations who have had a continuing presence here in Vermont since time immemorial. We acknowledge their ancestors, their history, and their continued presence with us today. Joining us for our presentation is Jody Freed, Chair of the Vermont Creative Network and also Executive Director of Catamount Arts, and Patty Comline, who manages government and public affairs for Downs Racklin Martin. And you'll hear from both of them in a moment. Today is one of 3 sessions focused on sharing information with all of you and empowering you to advocate for the creative sector. We recognize this is really a key moment when strategic investment in the creative sector can make a huge difference. It's key for 3 reasons: because we're still struggling to emerge from a global pandemic, which has hit the sector incredibly hard; because there's unprecedented spending happening on both the local and state and federal levels that can be mobilized and harnessed to boost the creative sector and help our communities to rebound and recover. And because the creative sector in Vermont is particularly strong and before the pandemic was already poised to be a driver of economic growth for our state. Many of you in the audience were part of building the Create VT Action Plan, a strategic action plan for Vermont's creative economy. Thank you to everyone who participated in our online forums, our face-to-face community meetings, and all of our idea jams that helped to shape the strategic priorities that you'll see reflected in our advocacy bill that we're about to discuss. At the heart of the Create VT plan is the recognition that creativity and cultural and artistic innovation are just as essential to Vermont as roads and bridges. They're part of the essential infrastructure of our communities. And you'll see that guiding assumption and that goal reflected in everything that we say and everything that you hear as we build our advocacy strategy moving forward. The Create VT Action Plan, as many of you know, is the culmination of 3 years of intensive research documenting the scope and the strength of creative businesses and cultural organizations and creative enterprises across our state. And if we could have the next slide, I'm going to quickly review what we mean when we talk about the creative sector. I know many of you are creative sector experts by now, but it's always helpful to have a quick reminder of what we're talking about when we talk about the creative economy and the creative sector in Vermont. So the creative sector represents all the businesses and individuals and organizations who produce products and services that are rooted in artistic and creative content. In Vermont, that's represented by 7 segments: visual arts and crafts, performing arts, that's theater, dance, music, the literary arts, which includes writing and publishing, artisan foods, culture and heritage, that's museums, historic preservation and historic sites, film and media, and design, which includes architecture, landscape design, and graphic design. And what our research has demonstrated is that all of those segments of the creative sector taken together, the jobs in all of those 7 areas, represent 9.3% of all employment in Vermont. That's about 41,000 jobs. The evidence is very clear that the creative sector is vital to Vermont's economic future. It drives economic growth. It brings vitality to our communities. It bolsters our state's reputation as a place of imagination and innovation. And it also is going to attract the younger people, the younger workers and millennials who we need to build their families here for Vermont to be able to face our demographic challenges. We know the pandemic has profoundly jeopardized the financial future of so many of our creative enterprises, and that across our state, many theaters, museums, community arts organizations, and galleries are still operating at very limited capacity. In our most recent round of cultural relief grants, the economic recovery program that the Arts Council ran in partnership with Vermont Humanities, we had 197 organizations that applied, cultural nonprofit organizations. And together, those 197 organizations reported more than $36 million in losses since the pandemic hit. Especially with winter coming, these organizations are facing a very uncertain future. We also know that our communities don't bounce back without the arts, that it's not just about the survival of an individual downtown theater or museum or art gallery. It's really about the long-term survival and sustainability of our communities. That's why the Vermont Creative Network is proposing a bill we're calling aspirationally the Vermont Creative Future Act. It's a bill designed to support cultural and arts organizations, independent artists, creative businesses, and all of the creative enterprises that make up the creative economy so that they can weather this financial storm and get to the other side. I'm very excited to share a draft of this bill with you. And we're going to put an outline of that bill up on the next slide. And I'm going to turn things over now to Jody Freed to explain what we're proposing with the Vermont Creative Futures Act.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Karen, for getting us kicked off today. And I just can't express to you how excited I am that we're having this conversation. Having been involved now for so many years, for us to get to the point where we have the strategic plan for the state. We've done all of that work with thousands of people participating. And now we're in a position to be able to meet the moment. And the moment is, really unique with the pandemic. No matter where you go in our communities right now, there's help wanted signs up, there's significant workforce issues. And we're still facing the reality of both the economic side and the just day-to-day managing of logistics around our operations within the creative network. For all of the creative enterprises in the state, this is a big lift, and making sure that we can make that lift successful is going to be critical for the state as it deals with its larger issues. And again, the pandemic has identified so many of those in terms of the stress it's put on, whether that's workforce or housing or economic development, mental health. There's so many different areas that the creative network is going to play a really important role in the future. So this bill that we're putting forward is made up of 6 different key asks, and we're putting these forward in no particular order, but I'll go through them as they're on your screen here. And the first is a $10 million investment in creative sector recovery. And this is to cover operating costs of organizations as we go forward into 2022, 2023, with the additional expense related to COVID-19. I know for Catamount Arts, we've been presenting and the cost in terms of doing vaccine checks, of doing the different mitigation efforts, the added expense to just putting on events in our daily operations is running significantly higher than it did pre-pandemic. There's lots of other pressures, including inflation, including wages. And so as we go into winter, that combined with the fact that attendance is clearly something that doesn't come back with the flick of a light switch, but something that takes time, and you have to build it up and you have to invest in it. And so this first bullet point here of investing in creative sector recovery is to infuse those dollars to allow the organizations to build back to their post-pandemic capacity where they're going to land as we get through the other side of this. And again, this is directly tied to the overall health of our communities. So this investment in terms of dollars made into the creative sector is going to help all of those other areas in our community as we make more things vibrant downtown. The second bullet point is COVID adaptation grants. And this is directly related to the things we need to do related to COVID-19 and the pandemic, but also an eye towards the future. And making sure that if there's different variants, if there's, as we move forward with pandemic preparedness, that we have what we need to be able to operate safely in this environment, whether that be touchless ticketing, online sales platforms, COVID-related health and safety protocols, which take time and money to build and implement, all of those types of things that allow us to adapt to be able to operate in this new reality. Similarly is bullet point number 3, which is COVID-related facility adaptations, but that is specifically around the infrastructure and the facility. So this would be adding outdoor seating, HVAC assessments and upgrades, things that allow us to operate within our facilities within the guidelines required to do it safely under COVID-19, or again, looking to the future. And the fourth bullet point is the statewide promotion and marketing of Vermont's creative sector. And this is directly related to trying to get the word out and build that confidence, getting audiences to come back. Again, it takes a lot of time and energy and money to be able to flick the switch when you haven't been presenting, or you've been presenting at a limited capacity, to be able to draw people back in. And this investment of $500,000 would allow us to help get that messaging out as a sector, but also to the individual organizations, getting folks into those seats ultimately and participating in those events. The fifth area is $250,000 to support the Vermont Creative Network itself. And you know, the Vermont Creative Network was established in 2016 by the legislature. They established it to fulfill a similar role that I believe the Farm to Plate had done a decade before, in the idea of building out the creative network. And the Vermont Arts Council has just invested a ton of time and energy and resources to make that happen, including 3 years of research and then the development of the Create VT action plan. But in order to move these initiatives forward, in order to actually implement the Create VT action plan, there's going to need to be an investment into the creative network itself. And so we're going to be looking for that $250,000 to help fund those resources needed to move that forward, the Vermont Creative Network itself. And then the final initiative that we're putting forward is studio spaces and vacant downtown storefronts. And we're asking for $750,000 for this particular initiative. And the idea here is to encourage downtown startups and to help them become sustainable. So in almost every downtown we go to throughout the state of Vermont, there are open storefronts. And the idea would be that these funds would flow directly into the to the landlords to allow that space to be used for creative enterprises. And then they would, over time, they would tear down so that by the end of the period of time of the grant, that the organization was able to self-sustain. So that's what we've got for you today. That we're moving forward with is this $17.5 million investment in the future of Vermont, and directly through the Vermont Creative Network and all of the organizations out there doing this incredible creative work. And And this is a moment, I think, that could be a paradigm shift for the way that we look at creative enterprises in Vermont and organizations, entities that are doing this work. And we start to really make the specific investment that is needed here in this sector to allow for it to flourish. And again, this goes hand in hand with economic development in rural communities. And we've seen that over and over again in the research, both our own research here in the Northeast Kingdom that we did, statewide that we've done, that's been published on a national basis, that was put out in the National Governors Association. We've got this body of evidence that is showing that rural communities that invest in the creative sector have a direct return on investment, and that those communities are the ones that are vibrant and thrive in the world that we're in today. And never has that been more important than now, as we're coming out of the pandemic with all of the other pressures on our communities and on our state. This is the time for this investment, and all of the work that we've done over the past 3 years and the last year creating this strategic plan, this is the moment for us to implement some of those initiatives and get this started. So I look forward to working with you all to make that happen. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Karen.
Great. Thank you so much, Jody. What Jody just described is extremely ambitious, and we know that. And that's why I'm very grateful that we have help from an expert on moving a proposed bill through the legislature. So I'm going to turn things over to Patty Comline from Downs Rockland Martin to walk us through what we can expect to see in the coming legislative session and how a proposed bill moves through the legislative process. Patty, welcome.
Thank you. I feel like I should be like that multiplication rock, how a bill becomes a law. But I've been asked to give you all a refresher on how a bill moves through the process. So the first stage is the life cycle of a bill is a conception. And in this case, we considered the need that was out there in the creative sector and translated that into an ask. Every bill needs a legislative sponsor or sponsors. We made a strategic choice based on the committees that will be considering this proposal. And we chose Senator Allison Clarkson and Representative Stephanie Jerome, who have enthusiastically accepted our request, and they submitted our work to the relevant legislative attorney. He's going to provide a draft bill that will be sent out to other legislators in the hopes of collecting additional sponsors. Signing onto a bill signifies an endorsement, so we want a good number of signatories. And we're kind of setting the stage for that now, as is Stephanie and Allison, as are Stephanie and Allison. And we've got a lot of people very interested in looking at that draft and are signifying that they're going to support that. So we're excited about that. We also talked to the governor's legislative liaison so that the governor does know that this ask is in the coming. So the bill, there's going to be both a House and a Senate version. They're called companion bills. They're going to be assigned to a committee, in this case, Senate Economic Development and House Commerce and Economic Development. Allison Clarkson sits on Senate Economic Development and Stephanie in the House Commerce Committee. So the House is probably going to take this up first, although we're not sure. And the way that works is testimony's taken. Karen and Jody and I will be working with a lot of other people and getting stories out there. So testimony's taken, the details are parsed out in the committee. The bill will be modified because the bill never ends up going through without any kinds of changes. They'll be voted upon, and then it'll be sent on. In this case, it will go to appropriations because this is a pretty significant ask of money. Appropriations will do the same thing. They'll take testimony and then they'll take a vote. It then moves to the House floor. Everything goes swimmingly. It'll be voted on with incredible support because we'll have done our work, and then it'll move to the Senate for the same process. So it starts all over again, and it's an intentionally arduous process, as it should be. It's really frustrating when people first get elected and you want things to move fast. They don't move fast, and it should be a lot of work to do this, and it is. So our work during the session is to prepare for that testimony. We're going to ask for experiences from different organizations within the creative sector. We're looking for stories backed up by data. People remember how you made them feel. So we want people to understand the situation for everybody in the last more than a year and a half now. So they need to understand that COVID is still here and people are still struggling. So we will be working on those stories. They'll be talking about grant formulas. ad nauseum. We will be there for that. We'll be following those conversations where we can offer. We did this with hospitality sector, where we actually had an accountant sit down with the committee, virtually sit down with the committee and walk through kind of their spreadsheets and their profit and loss statements and really delve into a lot of details. And it was heartening to see legislators really working on that. They had dedicated 2 hours with an accountant. If they want that from us, we can provide that. So we're also going to schedule a presentation with the Tourism Caucus. We talked to Stephanie about that. And so we can garner, just because if we miss people signing up for sponsoring the bill before it's introduced, we still work on collecting supporters of the bill. They don't have to be sponsors to be supporters. So we'll be talking to the Tourism Caucus. We're going to engage the 6 creative zones and the designated downtown groups to discuss grassroots work so we can get them speaking in support of this bill as well. What we will specifically be doing in addition at DRM is we attend all relevant committees. We monitor every meeting that's relevant to this for looking for opportunities and roadblocks, comments that are made as supportive or comments that are made that may be detracting or questioning, that we then follow up with those legislators. We submit reports on those meetings to people, and we have real-time calls when needed. And I know somebody had a question coming into this about a problem with one of the programs that was being administered last session or last go round. As I said, they will go over a lot of the formulas. Sometimes we have to be there and implore them with the effects that their decisions make on all of you. We do all we can so that the legislators have a clear understanding of the impact of those decisions. And so we work to make sure that they understand. And even when they decide to go a different way, we make it very clear that the problems with the decisions they're making. And we hope to change that up when we then move over to the Senate. We let them know, we know this is what you're doing, but when it goes over to the Senate, just so you know, we're going to be working with them so people have a clear understanding of the impacts of their decisions. So that's pretty much it. We're going to be working to engage, of course, with Karen and Amy and others to call on the grassroots when it's needed. We're your ears in these committees, and we let you know when it's time for you to share your voice. So I hope that gives you a pretty good understanding of the work ahead of us. And now I'm going to hand this virtual podium over to Karen.
Thank you. And I have to say, one of the great benefits of working with Patty and her team, besides their expert guidance and just having them as, I like to think of them as our legislative Sherpas to guide us up the mountain, but also just giving us day-to-day, sometimes minute-by-minute updates on what's happening in committees, because we know from just what it took to get the $5 million ask for the economic recovery package last session that things can change on a dime in a committee meeting or in a hallway conversation. And so having Patty and her team there when those conversations take place to report back to us and to position us and to tell us when testimony is needed is just absolutely critical. So we're thrilled to be working with Patty and her whole team. I'm going to encourage you all to post any questions in the chat. And I'm going to start off with a question to Patty, because I think there's one thing that people are probably wondering, which is, can you sort of talk through a rough timeline in terms of what month or what part of the month in the session do we expect things to happen? And particularly, when can people expect that engagement on the creative zone level to happen? When will we want to mobilize people to get involved, to get in touch with their legislators, people who might be on this call on the grassroots level?
So it's when the bill is taken up. We did talk a little bit about this over the last few weeks, is we really don't want to, we never want to become white noise, or we don't want to talk so much that they just tune you out. You want to be relevant at the right time. And we don't know exactly when that committee will take this up. There is an additional, the state was given over $1 billion to give out. The time frame for the ARPA money as opposed to the CARES Act money is a longer period. They have to allocate it by 2023. So they do have time, but it will be designated. They've spent 500 million. They've allocated 500 million. So in this session, they have to make decisions on an additional $500 million. That will be through many different committees. And so it's at the discretion of the committee chairs when they take things up. It's up to us to sit back at first, see what their schedule looks like, and then see if we have to, encourage them to take it up sooner. But February, March is going to be very busy for us. That's when I would. That was my long way. That was my long answer to a pretty short question. I apologize.
No, that's really helpful. You answered exactly what I was hoping.
Okay.
Thanks. And we have an interesting question in the chat. How will Vermont artists who are working in non-visual arts forms benefit from the $750,000 in support for use of downtown storefront space? Is that component of our act intended to serve theater, music, dance, literature, etc.? That's a great question. And I would say yes. There's no reason why a storefront could not be used for a performing arts as well. In fact, I think the Vermont Dance Alliance partnered with the Flynn during the pandemic and did some storefront performances and in those gallery windows at the Flynn, in the Flynn space. And Jody, maybe you could talk a little more about the experience in downtown St. Johnsbury with creating art in downtown, in abandoned retail spaces, because it was really successful there.
Sure. We've had a program called St. J Art on the Street that has been a collaboration of several organizations, the Chamber of Commerce. And in that case, we've taken vacant storefronts and activated them, but done it in a very organized, deliberate way where people could find information, essentially go on a walking tour of downtown to see the artwork that was curated in those windows. And what we found is that people are making trips into town. On any given day, you'll see people in front of those storefronts walking around, typically with their handheld checking information in regards to the artist. And what we've seen in terms of a benefit is that it's created a level of vibrancy. And as that program has moved forward, I think it has certainly contributed to the number of vacancies going down in downtown St. Johnsbury. And the fact that that has played a role in it, I think, is a good example. And I think to Karen's point in regards to the, the availability in regards to different mediums, different forms of art in those windows, we've certainly used that space in different ways. And I think that the key in terms of this particular bill ask is going to be that the organizations by the end of their grant period are in a position to be sustainable so that they can carry their rent. So that will be the premise that would go forward with. But in terms of what form of art form is in those windows, it seems to me that the more diversity and the more inclusive that is in terms of what's in our downtowns, the more effective it's going to be.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. There's no reason that it would need to be limited to visual arts. And I see another interesting question. It says, I'm trying to quickly summarize, because solid data is so very important in telling our story. Are there plans for updated statewide sector studies, perhaps inside the proposed funding for network support? So two different answers to that question. Some of the, if we are lucky enough to get that support for the sector, I mean, for the network, data collecting and monitoring will definitely be part of that ongoing sustaining of the network. We recognize that we need to keep on updating our data, and we also need to monitor our progress and create a kind of data-based, research-based report card so that we can say at the end of a year, 2 years, 3 years that we've made a difference, and the data demonstrates that. So yes to ongoing data collection and embedding that in the sustainability ask for the Vermont Creative Network. And I can also explain a little about how we approach data collecting in coming up with our economic loss figures for the direct grants, because I think that's something we're going to need to update as well. So we looked at data from the economic recovery grants that went to ACCD last round, and also from the CARES Act and American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA fund grants that we gave out in partnership with Vermont Humanities. We looked at a few different data points. Total losses that were reported by those organizations, losses as a percentage of operating budget, so that we could kind of break down what is the hit that a small or a medium or a large cultural organization or creative business has sustained, projections of future losses, and then also estimates of fixed monthly expenses. One of the things for nonprofit cultural organizations that we recognize is the continued burden during the pandemic of just paying for the mortgage and liability insurance and the heating bill, even when you don't have people sitting filling all your seats in your auditorium. So we got estimates from a sample of our cultural organizations for those fixed monthly expenses, but all of those figures will need to be updated on a rolling basis in order to be relevant and to help us to make our case. So thank you for that question. What else? I know Amy and Catherine were also monitoring the chat. So if there's something that I missed that you see, feel free to jump in. Or Jody or Patty, if there's something else that we neglected to talk about, jump in.
Karen, if you wanted to address the equity issue and maybe touch on the most recent relief funding with Vermont Humanities and the ways that we kind of gave special consideration around to help improve equity in the grant making.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's those of you who've been involved in shaping the Create VT action plan know that equity is one of the key guiding values and forces behind the shaping of that plan. And it was a guiding force when we shaped our CARES Act and ARPA economic relief grants that Amy just mentioned in partnership with Vermont Humanities. And we built an equity lens into the review process for those grants. What we did is we convened an external panel and a ranking rubric for grading the applications that came in. And we essentially gave extra points in the ranking system to BIPOC-led organizations or BIPOC-serving organizations. And we also made sure that organizations with the smallest operating budgets, who are most at risk of closure and often have least access to statewide cultural resources, so they're the most vulnerable group in two respects, both in terms of just ongoing access to resources and also financial vulnerability because of their size, but those smallest organizations were considered first. So we gave a significant proportion of the CARES Act and ARPA funds to organizations that were most vulnerable in those respects. And we would try, again, as Patty said, we may not get to set the funding formula exactly the way we want it, but we would try mightily to use a similar equity lens in drafting the funding formula for these grants, for this current bill.
Karen, if I can, just emphasize how important your relationships are with your individual legislators. Contacting them to say thank you, even if you have to dig deep and find a reason to thank them for things, before making an ask of them, sharing your individual stories with them, that absolutely matters. I was a legislator for 12 years, and I can tell you, anyone contacting you from outside your district is, you're very busy with your own district. So you hear from someone outside of it, they don't vote for you, right? Mm-hmm. So you listen to them, you're polite to them, but it doesn't matter like it does when you contact your own legislators. And having that respectful, positive relationship with them so that when you do need them, it's hugely important. I mean, I was texting people asking them to reach out to a legislator, and within minutes, I would hear that legislator refer to that constituent in a meeting. So it does matter to them, most of them. And so please, when we're asking for this outreach, bringing your voice in there will make a difference.
And Patty, I see a question for you. Representative Scott Campbell is here with us.
Oh, hey.
Hi, Scott. And it says, Patty, this is directly for you. Have you been in touch with House Commerce Chair Marcotte to get a reading on his support and approach Chair Hooper to let her know that this is coming?
Yes, Scott, it's good to, I can't see you on the screen, but it's good to have you here. I can speak to when I'm saying how legislators really do care about their constituents. I can tell you that Representative Campbell is absolutely one of those. He's an extremely hardworking legislator. And yes, we have a meeting with Mike Marcotte. I don't recall, Karen, it's in the next week or so, I know, and with Stephanie, and I'm hoping to get Representative Kimball on that call as well. Mary Hooper is more difficult to reach. I did put out an ask to her and have not heard from her. However, Peter Fagan will be meeting with us as well. So he's the vice chair there. And any help you can give me, Scott, with Representative Hooper would be great. And I'm happy also to catch up with you offline.
Other questions or thoughts?
If anybody, I'll also say, if anybody wants help in, how to craft your story to share with your legislators, it's fine if you let them know that, now. I mean, it's not too soon to just reach your legislator. It's too soon for us to really lean hard on those committees, but not too soon for you to have conversations with your individual legislators. And we're happy to help with that and how to make an impactful contact.
And along those lines, I'm going to issue a challenge to everybody. Thanks to Diane Derby, and I don't know if Diane's on the call, but many of you know her from her many years of work as Senator Patrick Leahy's field representative and a passionate arts advocate. And at one of our Create VT action plans meetings, Diane joined us and she left us with a quote that I love. Can we put that slide up, please? She said, if we achieve the goals set out in this ambitious plan, Vermont will be on the national map as the creative state. Diane, we love that quote. And I'm issuing a challenge to all of you to join us in our advocacy efforts to put Vermont on the national map to be the creative state. The next slide will give you some information about our 2 upcoming advocacy sessions, which I hope you'll join. And also Deirdre is posting in the chat the links for our advocacy page. It's also up here on the screen where you can find our advocacy toolkit. There are tips for approaching your legislator and talking points and data that's drawn from our Create VT action plan so that you go to meet with your legislator armed with the tools that you need to have a meaningful conversation. I hope you'll join us for those 2 upcoming sessions on Monday, November 15th and Tuesday, November 30th. And I see that Deirdre's also linking in the chat to the full Create VT strategic action plan. Jody, Patty, any closing thoughts?
I would just like to add one thing. I work with the hospitality sector, and one thing that was incredibly impactful and helpful was regional meetings. Like if you have ideas that you want to share with us we had a regional chamber of commerce bring on their legislators from that area, and the people told their own stories in the privacy of a closed virtual room, and it made a huge difference. So if you would like to work with us in getting, in developing ideas like that, this is a very big lift. Only 10% of bills actually make it into law. This is a significant amount of money we're asking, and we'll need everybody's help to get this done. And so we're absolutely there to help support you in getting the word out to legislators in your districts.
And I would just chime in to take the time to share this with folks across sectors right now. Folks that are running healthcare organizations, that are running manufacturing, that are in retail, because everybody right now has a vested interest in solving the problems here in Vermont. And I think when you sit down and go through this with them and lay it out, they're going to understand how this could directly impact the communities that they're operating in. So go across those sectors and share this with as many people as you can as we move forward.
Great. Well, Jody and Patty, thank you so much. And thank you everybody for joining us. Hope to see you on the 15th. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.